could this threaten anyone's safety? In what conceivable way could housing someone in a supermax federal prison affect the local community, especially when you're talking about 60 or 70 people, not 7,000 people throughout the country? And has anyone ever escaped from a supermax federal facility?
Well, certainly as a tribute to the strong efforts of the Bureau of Prisons, I do not believe anyone has escaped from supermax.
Ever?
As far as I know, they have never escaped from supermax, and certainly the men and women of the Bureau of Prisons are dedicated professionals and do everything in their power to run that institution in a way that protects the American people but also contains the security issues therein. With respect to your question, Congressman, it certainly is difficult to say. Obviously, I have the greatest pride and respect for the brave men and women of the Bureau of Prisons. Indeed, I feel that the men and women of the entire Department of Justice can do anything. So certainly, I think that they are up to any task that is assigned to them. And of course, we look forward to working with Congress to consider these issues should such a change be made.
And so, in other words, the summary of your testimony is that bringing people to supermax prisons would pose no danger to anyone in communities or in the United States?
Well, Mr. Congressman, I certainly am not in a position to say that any prisoner poses no danger ever. We certainly have the security regulations over a host of dangerous inmates for very, very significant reasons. But I am, of course, tremendously proud of the work of the men and women of the Bureau of Prisons. And, of course, this issue is one that is before Congress. I believe it is going up, as has been indicated, to the White House, and we would work with Congress with respect to whatever decisions are made in providing information that could best inform its decisions.
Thank you. I see my time has expired.
Time of the gentleman has expired. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Smith, for his questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Madam Attorney General, under this administration, the number of sanctuary cities has doubled to about 340 jurisdictions. As a result, many innocent Americans have been killed. What are you doing to discourage jurisdictions from claiming sanctuary status?
I'm sorry, the last part of your question, Congressman?
The number of sanctuary jurisdictions has doubled under this administration. What are you doing to discourage municipalities from asserting sanctuary status? By doing so, of course, they are endangering Americans because individuals are released who commit crimes, including murder, rape, and so forth. But what are you doing to discourage sanctuary cities?
Well, Congressman, with respect to the issues that you raised, certainly they are very serious. We are committed to enforcing our criminal and immigration laws.
But there's a law in the books that prohibits sanctuary cities. What are you doing to enforce that law?
I believe the designation of a sanctuary city is something that was within the purview of...
No, it's actually in an act I introduced that became law in 1996.
I'm sorry, sir, I'm having trouble hearing you.
Okay. There is clearly a law in existence that prohibits jurisdictions from refusing to cooperate with the federal government when it comes to detaining criminal aliens, criminal immigrants. What are you doing to enforce that law?
Well, where we have a situation where that situation occurs, we certainly would talk with that jurisdiction. We would reach directly in and enforce the criminal laws against the individuals themselves.
But you're not doing so. Give me one example where you have enforced current law that prohibits jurisdictions from claiming sanctuary status.
Well, what I'd like to do, sir, is study that issue and provide information to you on that point.
I would hope that you'd have more knowledge about enforcing immigration laws than that, but I will await your report as to what you have done. Next question is, a recent IG report found that Chairman Chaffetz's Secret Service file was improperly accessed and publicly disclosed by Secret Service managers. This may have violated the Privacy Act, the Computer Abuse Act, and perhaps amount to obstruction of justice. Have you taken any disciplinary action whatsoever against the Secret Service managers involved with the disclosure of that file?
Congressman, my understanding is that that matter is being handled by their Inspector General, the Secret Service, as part of the Department of Homeland Security. Right. And so with respect to those specific administrative or disciplinary actions, my understanding is that their Inspector General is
reviewing that. Some of the laws that may have been violated come under your jurisdiction. Are you aware of any investigation by DOJ into that matter or not?
I'm not able to comment at this time. I would certainly provide information to you.
Okay, and you would certainly let the member involved know of any investigation, would you not?
I'm sorry, sir.
You would certainly let the member involved know of any investigation, would you not?
Well, typically we do not comment on whether an investigation is open or not.
I know. I'm
With
not
respect
asking
to
you to
whether
comment publicly on the details. I'm asking you if you would alert the member if there was an investigation ongoing.
Are you referring to the member of the Secret Service?
No, the member of Congress whose
The member
files
of
were
Congress. Thank you,
made
sir.
public. And
We would certainly do everything we could to provide what information we could consistent with our law enforcement obligations.
okay, thank you. And then let me ask you one more question about the FBI. And that is, to your knowledge, has the President or any White House staff or you or any of your staff attempted to influence the FBI's investigation of former Secretary Clinton?
No, sir.
Okay. Do you have any idea when that investigation will be completed?
Well, I'm not able to comment on the status of that matter, and we typically do not comment. And also, it's impossible to predict when any matter will be concluded, so I'm not able to give you information on that.
And I'm not asking for a comment on the contents of the investigation, just an idea when it might be finished, or have you heard when it might be finished?
Sir, again, I'm not able to comment on the timing of the conclusion of any matter.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks, the gentleman. Recognizes the gentlewoman from California, Ms. Lofgren, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Attorney General. It's a pleasure to have you here, and I look forward to working with you not only today, but as in the months ahead. As you likely know, I am on the Immigration Subcommittee, and I follow closely what your department is doing in that arena. Your predecessor, Attorney General Holder, testified in 2013 before the Senate, and this is a direct quote: "It is inexcusable that young kids, 6, 7-year-olds, 14-year-olds, have immigration decisions made on their behalf against them, and they're not represented by counsel." Now, in July of this year, the American Immigration Council and several other organizations filed a class action lawsuit in district court in the Western District of Washington, challenging the validity of removal proceedings for children without appointed counsel. And their argument was that that an 8-year-old couldn't receive a full and fair hearing in the immigration court without representation. As you know, I'm sure, the administration has made efforts to provide counsel to small children by funding nonprofit groups, but the Assistant Attorney General, who argued, I think Mr. Leon Fresco, actually argued contrary to that in the district court. And I'm wondering, if the department's position has changed since Mr. Holder left the department, and whether you think it could meet due process to have an 8-year-old who speaks only Spanish appear in immigration court without a lawyer and be able to argue the nuances of immigration law and asylum law. Do you think that meets due process requirements?
Thank you, Congressman. With respect to the argument that was made on the issue, of course, I'd have to review those pleadings to understand the specific context and whether or not there was an appropriations issue involved as to whether...
Fair enough. What do you think about the due process issue?
And again, thank you for that issue, because it is an important one. And as you noted, certainly it's the department's position that, as a general matter, all who appear before tribunals, whether they be courts, administrative bodies, tend to have a more efficient process and a fairer process if they are represented by counsel. Certainly, we have statutes and laws to that effect with regard to adults, criminal matters, and the like. For those children, also, it certainly would seem to increase efficiency of the entire process to have counsel. And as you've noted, I believe that through our grant process, we have supported nonprofit or NGO organizations that have provided counsel there for those children.
So you're not willing to say that it doesn't meet due process requirements at this point?
Well, what I would like to do is look at the procedures that are in place before I made a constitutional determination about due process, but I certainly do agree that it's an area of concern, and that as a general matter, we support counsel in proceedings for litigants, particularly children.
Let me ask you this. The Department of Homeland Security Office of Inspector General has done an analysis of, we have many people from Central America in particular who are seeking asylum, and what he reports, that there's a review called Operation Streamline that found that the Department of Justice has actually prosecuted asylum seekers for illegal entry before their asylum case is heard. And it seems to me that, well, not only does that violate the requirements of international law, but it doesn't seem like an efficient use of resources. If someone gains asylum under the law, then their prosecution would not be very pertinent. And I'm wondering, have you reviewed that IG's report yet?
I have not reviewed that specific IG's report, but what I can tell you is that the prosecution and apprehension of individuals at the border is one to which the not just the department but the specific U.S. attorneys in those border states devote significant time and attention. And steps are taken at the initial level to try and ensure that those who are seeking asylum are handled appropriately, and that those who are coming in for other intents and purposes are handled through the immigration law system and often the criminal law system.
Can I ask you whether you would please take a look at that report and make sure that we're actually using our resources in a sensible way relative to asylum seekers?
Certainly. We're always happy to review the way in which we use our resources.
Finally, I want to mention a situation. We've had a class action complaint that's now moot because the individuals who filed the complaint have been released from detention. Their mothers who are being held in prison with their children in Cairns, and they had a demonstration, and in response they were put in solitary confinement with their children, and their argument was that they have free speech rights. Here's my question. Do you think immigrants in detention are entitled to constitutional rights of due process and the First Amendment and the like?
Well, I certainly think that when it comes to the conditions in our detention centers, we need to do all that we can to ensure that treatment is fair, humane, and cognizant of the individual rights of all of those who come through those systems. I think that we have recognized certain rights for those within our borders, certain rights for citizens, and in varying degrees with respect to the Constitution. But barring that, or even taking that into consideration, certainly I believe that all of our detention centers should be run efficiently, fairly, and humanely.
I see that my time has expired, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for allowing me to go a little bit over.
The chair recognizes the gentleman from California, Mr. Issa, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General Lynch, as you may recall, a